Jain 108. I'm really excited to be here. This is a moment that I've waited for a decade, that one day I'll be able to reach a global audience to share my passion with sacred geometry. I have an hour to spend with you right now, and this is sacred geometry at its best, and we're transducing down this knowledge to the level of a beginner's course. So everything that I'm going to show you now can actually be shared to not just adults and parents, but we want this knowledge to go to children of all ages. So you can just sit back and watch all the pictures. If you've got any comments to make, you can put it in. So this is a really exciting time. So I'm just going to, I have about 100 slides here for you, and we're doing it in three parts. First part is cosmogenesis. That's kind of asking, well, what does sacred geometry mean? Does it mean remembering where we came from? And it's how we incarnated, and it somehow has a lot to do with the five platonic solids. Every cell in our body is based on sacred geometry. That's an introduction, and then we want to get to the essential part called divine proportion, and that's all about the fabulous Fibonacci sequence. And I want to talk about some special time codes that are embedded or hidden within this mathematics of flowers, and it's the time codes called 24 and 60, the numbers of time. And there's an advanced part three, if we have time. We're looking at phi, the golden ratio, and how it connects to one of the Vedic sutras. So there's a lot of ancient knowledge here, and we're making it modern for contemporary times. So let's look at the first one, cosmogenesis. Cosmo means order in the ancient Greek. Genesis, the gene of Isis, is our beginning of creation. So let's look how we started. And this somehow relates to what we call the binary code. So binary means the doubling sequence. There's a pattern in the doubling sequence. So are you engrailed? Remembering where we came from. So this is when we connect, copy nature and comprehend it, we're connected, we're engrailed. So in the beginning, we were one original cell. You could call it a sphere of genetic information. And it came from the father and the mother. Each father-mother contributed each 23 chromosomes, and that's called the zygote. So the original primal cell was the zygote. And we believe that the geometry of the first cell, you can see here that there's four rings or four spheres, and these four spheres have nodal points, and it makes 6 squares and 8 triangles. And so this was the energetic grid or lattice around all living things, not just human cells, but plant cells. So we know that there's 12 nodal points here. I'll show you what this looks like as a shape. It's called the cube octahedron. This has 12 12 vertices. So we believe that 12 sperms aligned in this sacred geometry of the cube octahedron, which allowed the 13th to penetrate and create life. So before cell division, there was a universal template of geometry called the cube octahedron. It was also this shape as well. So these rubber joins here show you the 12 vertices around the human egg. So this is the female egg inside, and it has this shape-shifting quality that when you squeeze it, it makes all the five platonic solids like pyramids and tetrahedron. So somehow from our very beginnings, we were connected to source. We've got all this knowledge encoded in us. But then something happened. The one became the two. And to understand how the one became the two, which is a separation from God, we need to look at a puzzle. If we had one circle, how many other circles go around the same circle? They're all the same size. So here's 6 coins. It's called C7, carbon 7. What you're looking at is the key to all future technology called carbon 7 nanoparticle technology. And as you can see, that those 6 centers make the Star of David. But in 3D, the same puzzle would be if we have a central sphere. So let's say we had one sphere, we've got 3 here. How many spheres how many spheres around the center can pack around a central sphere? We know from the coins that there's six around the one, but there's certain values upon these, and you can see that these 3 fit there. So now we've got 9, and if I do it carefully, the next 3 sit in the top values. So this is what you looked like in the first minutes of conception was that you were the 12 around the one. And what the 12 around the one means is that when someone like Jesus has so much love and it expands and they attract 12 disciples. So it's our duty to keep a connection to our what we call auric health, our inner health, and keep eating pure foods and pure water so that our energy can expand and we never get sick. So by remembering sacred geometry, we're staying connected to nature. So this is what we looked like, the 12 around the one, before we separated into two. And that's the cube octahedron there, which has 24 edges, 12 internal vectors. It represents perfection of order. That's why it's called cosmogenesis. Cosmo is order. There's a group called Genesis who are wearing this as a crystal. So it's to enhance your field. So after the two, each two cells separate to become four. So at 4 cells, if you took the center of those 4 cells, you became a pyramid. But it's called a tetrahedron. Tetra means 4. So embedded within the tetrahedron is a copy of itself. It's called self-similar. There's a fractal inside of this that we might explore later. It makes a copy of itself. Then the 4 becomes the 4. Or there's a picture of the self-similar shape. That little tetrahedron that's inverted fits inside the mother shape 27 times, and 27 is the key to advanced knowledge, because when you keep doubling 27, because 27 little tetra fit inside the mother shape, we double 27, get 54, double, you get 108, 216, 432, 864, and these are all harmonics of the diameter of the sun and the number of seconds in a day. So harmonic maths actually springs from the memory of all these shapes that we were. So after 4 cells, we split and we become a cube. So we all know that the cube has 8 corners, right? But what's inside the cube? This is what the children explore in some of my classes. We might take this, the center of those 6 faces and discover that inside the cube is an octahedron, right? And if you took the octahedron, the diamond light body, there's 8 triangles. If we join the 8 centers of the 8 triangles, we get a little cube inside of that. So we keep discovering. We learn by discovering the language of the universal language of shape and pattern. But what's inside the cube, if you were to stare deeper into the matrix, you'd see that there's really 2 tetrahedron here. If I put it flat, you can see that it's actually cubic. And this is like the atomic structure of salt, sodium, and chloride. But this is what you look like at 8 cell division. And if you took off these 8 smaller tetrahedron, if I could literally take them off, what's left inside is the diamond light body. So in the first minutes of creation, you were a diamond with 8 pyramids around it. Then it kept dividing. So it doesn't end there. So this is why it's called the doubling sequence, because we've gone from 1, 2, 4, 8. And at 16, what happens when we're 16 is that there's a cube within the cube. So each cube has 8 and another 8 inside. And this forms like Thor's hammer. There's a lot of movies now with the Marvel cinema showing that the power of the double cube, or the tesseract, the cube within the cube, is a very powerful source of energy. So you can see here, if you look closely, you'll see a central circle with 6 around it. That's the 6 around the 1, and then another 6 circles. So 1 plus 6 plus 6, with 13 circles, we create all the 5 platonic solids from this. So this is an amazing diagram, but it shows you the cube within the cube. And as an animation, it would look like this. We're learning how to turn ourselves inside out, and that essentially we are a fractal of a larger universe. Like it kind of asks the question: are we an ocean in a drop of water, or a drop in the ocean? So sacred geometry is helping us to connect where we came from and the source of all knowledge, which is embedded in ourselves. So something happens after 16. If we keep doubling, 16 becomes 32, 64, 128, double that is 256. But when we get to 512 cells, the stark geometry, the male geometry, collapses into a feminine form. And you can see here that we became this thing called a torus, and a torus literally means a ring. And you can see here that there's two openings for the torus. So here there's suction going in, and then if you look at the other side, there's suction going out. And so really, when we were two directions, we're not just with the diamond. Most people think we're north, south, east, west, top and bottom, zenith and nadir, but that's the Cartesian map of 6 directions. But really, I believe that we're actually 2 directions. We have an in, which is your mouth, sucks everything in, and then it spits it out here, and this is the anus where everything comes out. So this is a summary of sacred geometry. We were a mouth and an anus in the first 512 cells. It has a bit to do with what we call implosion, because the modern technology today is all based on explosion, which means we've got half of it right, but the technology we're using is disharmonic because we're not working in accordance with the laws of nature. So there's some fantastic images of toruses where we can look at a hurricane. A shaman knows how to survive a say hurricane because they go into the center of the torus and they find what they call is a still point, so you don't get destroyed by this great power. So that's a great definition of a shaman, is how to become one with this geometry. So here's a picture of Alex Gray showing the toroidal field that's around the human form, and the center of the torus is the heart. That was the first organ that developed after 512 cells. The first organ to develop was the heart, and it emanates a certain field around the heart. So when we show love and compassion, according to the Heart Math Institute, we're emanating a toroidal field. But when they examined it closer, they noticed that there were fields within fields. And what you're seeing here is the transverse cut of embedded toroi, many toroi that have a certain relationship how they expand. So when we know that the torus gets larger and larger by the Fibonacci sequence, which is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, we're going to look at that soon. We have what we call expansion, which means the torus field allows us to access the macrocosm and also to come back to where we started from, to the microcosm, from the galaxy to the atom. So here's some exotic pictures of the torus within the torus, and it means that when we cut the torus in half, not vertically, but when we do it transverse cut, we actually see the infinity symbol. So there's a flattened torus here that looks like a blood cell. That's the inside of the torus. So this whole journey that we're talking about started from the 12 around the 1. So 1213 is what we call a code. And there's another one coming up called 2460, which is all within the Fibonacci sequence. So when we feel fear, our energy contracts around the heart. And they've demonstrated that when we feel love, there's an expansion principle going on. That's an animation of a torus in 3D, like a tornado. This has got to do with the Earth grid. The reason I'm showing you this is that we're going to be doing more webinars, and we're going to do a whole section just on the Earth grid, and it's all based on the Fibonacci sequence. But it just shows that all sacred sites, like the pyramids of Egypt, is grid point 1. In Uluru, we're at grid point 44. That's called Wilpena Pound, and Stonehenge is another grid. So all sacred sites obey these lines of energy. Okay, so this is a 3D flower of life. So often when we just look at a flower of life, it's a flat thing, but in 3D the question is, what's its three-dimensional form? And you can see that in Beijing, they had these food dogs with massive claws around the three-dimensional flower of life to say that this is sacred knowledge, and it's we're protecting this ancient knowledge, that it gets used for the correct purposes. So a lot of these things I'm showing you, these mandalas, are really called yantra. Yantra is power art. The mandala here is the sphere, and the shadow of this sphere is really what we call the yantra, the power diagram. So you can see now when you look at the flower of life, it actually has a hexagonal view because it's the memory or the shadow of a cube, the cube of creation, the cube of space. So that's why in the mass consciousness, everyone's talking about the flower of life, and there's another version of it. Okay, so that's the part one. I went through that a little bit quickly because that alone, what I've just shown you now, is a whole 2 hour lecture. I just wanted to show you that. So the main section now, part two, is talking about my passion, my lifetime passion for the Fibonacci, the fabulous Fibonacci sequence. I've spent 40 years of my life since school researching. I've gone down this rabbit hole and I've discovered immense symmetry and patterns that are timeless. So people say, why is it called sacred geometry? When I say sacred, it doesn't mean that it's a religiousness. Sacred here means that which is permanent, that which is forever and timeless. So let's have a look at some patterns. Okay, I went to Tibet in about 1989 and I met the Dalai Lama's astrologer, and he introduced me to some amazing concepts in the Tibetan calendar, the Sino Chinese Tibetan calendar. And this is how I started. So when I was in my early 20s, I discovered the Tibetan calendars, and I realized, why do they have at the center of the calendar these 9 numbers called the magic square? They called it the Lo Shu. So you can see here there's the image of a fiery tortoise like a Buddha coming down, and it's incarnating and revealing the zodiac of 12. And also in the middle we got the 9 numbers called the Mewa. So I realized that 12 lots of 9 was 108. So why was 108 a sacred number to the Indians? That's what's going to be revealed later on. So at a young age, I was thinking, why did they put those 9 numbers of the magic square could have been put anywhere else, but they were put right in the heart of the calendar, which means it must be important to be in the middle of the cosmic tortoise. So these are mathematical codes that relate to our incarnation from spirit to earth. So the Tibetans actually believe that every number has a soul. So when you put a magic square together of 9 numbers, it's actually a whole community of souls. And then the next thing I saw, there's a goddess called Durga, but her name is Amba. Amba means the Divine Mother. So here's the Divine Mother, and she's got weapons like the sword will pierce reality, the trident will squash illusion, and she's got axes and light discs, and the club that she holds will squash greed. So there's this powerful woman, very archetypal, but at the base near her feet is a triangle of 9 numbers. Here's another picture of her. So you can see the triangle written in Sanskrit with 9 numbers, and they all added up to 20, 20, 20. So this year we're talking now is the year 2020, and here we have a mathematical code that for 5,000 years, Ambaji, her tantrical psychic symbol, was a triangle of 9 numbers that all added up to 20, 20, and 20. In India, they call it the Bees, means 20, the Bees Yantra. And these were powerful diagrams, and they had great impact on my consciousness. Because we're talking about time codes, I believe that the magic square of 3, which is going to be another webinar, is a universe of information. So we're not going to go there now, but it does create the atomic structure of diamond. Okay, so our focus now is Fibonacci sequence. So we start from 1, and then there's a 0 before it. So you say 0 and 1 is 1. 1 and 1 make 2. 1 and 2 make 3. I keep adding the previous number to the last number. So 2 and 3 make 5. 5 and 3 and 5 make 8. It goes on. And these numbers will appear in flowers and planetary distances. But my job as an educator is to make mathematics beautiful. So when we turn numbers into pictures, I'm going to turn all these numbers like 2, 3, 5, 8 into squares. And you can see that when you put the squares down like tiles, you make what we call a golden rectangle, or the phi rectangle, and it's very elegant, and you can see that the golden spiral fits inside these tiles of squares. So the real secret is in the pine cone. So here's a pine cone. If I pick up a pine cone, you can see that there's 8 spirals going one way. So this way they're going clockwise to me here. But if you look closely on and squint your eyes, there's an alternate or counter-rotating field where there's 13, not 8, but there's 13 going anti-clockwise. So the question is, why does nature choose to adopt what they call counter-rotating fields. Nature doesn't like midpoints. Nature, like when we bend our elbow, if I look at spread out my arm and call it 1 unit, halfway is 0.5, but nature doesn't have the elbow at 0.5. It has a bit more than the midpoint at 0.618. So everything in the human body, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, all my joints in my body obey the mathematics of flowers. So the pine cone is really a pine code. And you can see that in the history of the Vatican, they built a 5-story pine cone. The largest pine cone ever done in the world as a statue is in the Vatican City. So we have to ask questions why, and why did the Assyrian deities hold pine cones in their hands, these winged gods? It's huge. And the Vatican, even the Pope's rod has a pine cone on it. So is it the pineal gland? Is this a connection to the third eye? And here's another vortex. When you look at a sunflower, it has 2134 spirals, counter-rotating field. So this is nature's secret. It's not equal spin. It's not 2121. It's offset 2134. And if nature didn't do this, those seeds in the sunflower would literally fall out. So there's the seeds. It's called perfect packing or perfect compression. Compression means to squeeze. It's the key to all science. So this is nature's numbers, the most optimum that we can ever use. So here we have an exhibition of metal spheres arranged in the mathematics of I think it's the daisy. The daisy flower has 21 and 13 spirals. And all you can see is elegance, pure mathematical distributed harmony. And it just works really well. So we want to copy this and use this in our designs. There's a thing called a golden angle, where if we divide the circle in the ratio of 5 to 8 or 1 is to 1.618, we get with a perfect division. And that angle that you see, 137.5, is the key to how branches come off a tree. And that number 137 as a reciprocal is one of Einstein's numbers. So here's these top-end, high-end nuclear physicists, and they're obsessed about the number 137 because it's reciprocal. When you divide it into unity consciousness, reveals a lot to do with protons and neutrons. So it's all inside the flower. It's in our hand. It's in our body. The Buddha was in 3. You weren't allowed to draw the Buddha unless you knew the ratio of 3 is to 5 is to 8. Perfect division. The DNA is based on pentagons and hexagons. I won't go into it there, but the hydrogen zipper in the heart of the double helix is all based on golden rectangles where the hydrogen atoms align. So there's a connection there. So you can see that when we use the phi spiral in our designs, it creates magnetism, attraction. It's attractive. And how do you find the eye of the spiral, what we call the sweet spot? We need to have certain divisions of the diagonals of the larger and smaller golden rectangles. It creates a point like here in the that point, the sweet spot, would be the center of the torus here, where everything gets sucked in, and it's like you can enter another dimension. A lot of legends were saying that if you flew through the eye of the sun, you could go into another universe. So there's all these stories about Taurus and golden eyes, the sweet spot. Okay, inside the dodecahedron, here's the dodecahedron. This is the 3D version of the 5-pointed star, which is all based on those Fibonacci numbers. So we're not interested in the 5-pointed star, we're interested in the 3D shape. And inside of this are golden rectangles, which it shows you that the golden rectangle, which is also the shape of your MasterCard or credit card, it actually fits in the, see this rectangle in my hand? The hand's very square, but there's a rectangle in there. So if that's 8 units, that's 13. So that's why the credit card fits really nicely in your hand so that you can be attracted to it and spend more money. So what happens when we turn the squares, Fibonacci squares, into cubes? We end up with another special thing. We end up with curves in space. So when I look at those cubes now and draw arcs in space, I end up with what's called the ram's horn. So this is the 3D version of the ram's horn. And you can see why in ancient times the ram's horns were the symbol of the Pan, the god of nature, adopted the ram's horn because it was a symbol of creation. It's something that to be have reverence for, not fear, because it's a key to get into your DNA. It represents this pathway of evolution goes infinitely large, and as it contracts, it goes infinitely small into the atom. And when we rotate this in space, one ram's horn, we end up with another secret. So we end up with what we call a torus. So many horns, spirals, form what is called the torus. And remember, the torus was what we looked like when we were 512 cells. So just a quick summary. We started in one dimension with a linear Fibonacci sequence, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. And then we turned it into a picture to get a 2D spiral. So we end up with, in 2 dimensions, we end up getting, say, the golden spiral, right? But we're not interested in a flat spiral. We were interested in the 3D, which gave us the ram's horn. And now we're looking at the 4th dimension called the torus. So the torus, there's energy. You can see spring is energy. If I take it around and join the ends, the beginning to the end, I end up having a torus that knows how to turn itself inside and out. So there's the torus, which as children we loved this. It would walk down the steps. So that's the torus. And I'd love to do a whole webinar just on toroidal consciousness. It's a fascinating thing. We have fractal golden triangles here, and those angles in there are 36 degrees and 72 degrees. They're important for when you start studying things. But essentially, when we look at a 5-pointed star, it has, when you cut an apple transverse cut, you'll see that there's a 5-pointed star of seeds inside. So the question is, why does nature choose pentagonal symmetry to nest its life? Because that seed represents the future, its DNA. So nature uses the pentagon for what we call perfect compression. The symbol for Pythagoras was the 5-pointed star, because the star reduces at 0.618. Every time you draw the star within the star, it reduces at a critical ratio, which is called non-destructive compression, which means the star can go infinitely small and infinitely large and still retain the shape of itself. And that's called fractal. Not fraction, but fractal means when the inside is the same as the outside. So there's a lot of construction, how to generate phi. So if you put a square inside the semicircle, so if AB, the distance there is 1 unit, that little section touching the circumference called BG is 0.618. So we're already in the golden ratio. So just by drawing a square, a unit square in the semicircle, we've revealed the harmonics of the circle. And the same with the triangle. So when you see a triangle in a circle, think of it as a tetrahedron inside the sphere. And the distance you see there, AB, if AB is 1, BG is 0.618. So that ratio of the segments of the midpoints of the 3 sides touching the sphere is all based on the golden ratio. So basically what I've discovered in my life is that no matter what I look at, the golden ratio is in every single polygon and form that I know. So this is kind of like a God mathematics. It's even inside the pyramid. So if I wanted, as a builder by trade, I want to draw create a roof on top of the cube. Excuse me. If I know that a apothem from the center to the side is 1 unit, then I know that the slope height is 1.618. So I need to know this ratio of 5 to 8 or 8 to 13 to construct the pyramid. So this is some of my early art. You can see there's a golden triangle with a rainbow coming through, and there's a picture of me. I'm about 20 years of age, and I've got my head in the sand because somehow I had all this soul memory, and I didn't know how to what to do with it. So I was still learning. So I ended up living near New Guinea for 2 years in a rainforest where I studied how leaves fall and how the water flowed, and it was all spiral. So I learned geometry while I was traveling around the world. And here you can see the golden spiral, and inside of every section, we can see these beings of light beings. So I was looking at the spiral as a life-giving um, example of creation. So these were my early diagrams. I have like 1,000 of these drawings, and I'm going to release that in a book called the Book of Doodles one day. Okay, so the reason why I'm showing you the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, is that there's two important things that are hidden inside of it. There's a 60 code and a 20 code. So you can see here that if we were to take the Fibonacci numbers, if you start from the top where it says 0, actually before we look at the Fibonacci numbers, I can say from this diagram that every fifth Fibonacci number is divisible by 5, and that's why you see the 12 golden rays. So there's a 12 pointed star there, and you see a 0 at the quadrant points at north, south, east, west, and every fifth number is divisible by 5. So let's look at the Fibonacci numbers. We go 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. So that's on the top right. But when we get to 13, I want you to look at the last digit. So from 13, it's a 3, which means we're taking away 10. And then the next Fibonacci number is, after 13, is 21. So you look at the last digit 1, and or you just take away 10, and 10 you end up with a 1. So if we were to keep doing that, it's called continued subtraction of 10. We end up with a wheel of 60, infinitely repeating code, and all the opposite pairs. If you put your finger up the top number 1 and go right through the center, you'll see the opposite number is 9. Or if I looked at a 2, the opposite number is the 2 opposite the 2 is an 8. Or if you looked at the 3, opposite the 3 is a 7. So all the opposing pairs on the wheel of 60 are 10. So it's interesting that 60 comes up as something that's infinitely repeating. And I've spent many, many years on this. This actually was discovered 250 years ago by Jean-Louis Lagrange, a French mathematician who was a friend of Euler. He became head of mathematics in Prussia, Germany, a great mind like Einstein. So he found these repeating digits, this 60 code. But there's another exciting one that's coming up too. So what I discovered is that when you ignore the 0s and the 5s, because there's 12 of them, look at the numbers between 0 and 5 at the top. You have 1, 1, 2, 3. Now let's go look through this center from opposite those 4 numbers. The next 4 numbers opposite that on the wheel is called 9987. If you add up those quad numbers, I've invented that word quad because this is one of my important discoveries. 1,123 plus 9,987 adds up to 11,110. And in harmonics, we drop off the 0 and we end up with 4 1s. Like in poker, you get 4 aces. It's a winning hand. So this wheel of 60 is showing that all the opposite pairs add up to 1 1 1 1. And because they all do that, all those 12 pairs, the 6 pairs actually do that, and they all, adding up all those quad numbers, adds up to 66,660. Drop off the 0, you end up with harmonic 6666. So I'm really excited about that, and that's the sort of stuff that I want to share with you, because these have got to do with time codes. These are really fascinating connections to what we would call a higher technology that's based on pure intent, that serves humanity, not controls people. So I've done this as a decal or a sticker where you can see on the outer ring, starts from the 0 at the top and the 60 numbers repeat. But if you look closely, there's an inner ring of 24, which leads me to the next chapter. The final bit on the Fibonacci sequence is there is another pattern revealed when we take away the number 9. Number 9 is that which underpins of all creation. So it's called Phi code 1 because we start with 1 and 1 and we add those numbers, we get a 2. So you see it's called Phi code 112, and we're going to expand it out. And okay, a bit of information on the number 24 is in Tamil Nadu in India, they had 24 carvings of the Jain gods, the 24 Buddhas, that were before the last one. So the last one was Mahavir at the time of Buddha, but they had 23 others before him. So here we see carved in rock 24 saints. So why did they carve this on the mountain? What's so special about it? It's because when you take away 9 from every Fibonacci number, it reveals a 24 pattern going 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 4, 3, 7, 1, 8, 9. It goes on and on. So as you can see here, I've written out the Fibonacci numbers, the first 24. So the 24th Fibonacci number is a big number, 46,368. And what I've done, the column underneath shows that if you take the number 13 and you take away 9, you will get a 4. If you take the number 21, take away 9, you end up, say, with 12, and then you say if you take away 9 from 21 and then another 9, you end up with a remainder of 3. But it works out, the shortcut is just to add the digits. So let's look at number 34. Instead of taking away 9, 9, 9, we just say 3 plus 4 is 7. And that's a Vedic sutra called digit sums. So that's another whole thing we want to talk about later on, is digital compression from the Vedic sutras. So this is the pattern, the 24 pattern, but we want to circularize it. So when we do it as a wheel, so here, this time I started off with 0 at the top, and opposite the 0, if you go through the center, is a 9. The next number 1, opposite the 1 is an 8. So it appears quite clearly that all the opposite pairs on this wheel of 24 add up to 9. So if there's a 4, you go across, you see a 5. If there's a 2, go across, you see a 7. So there's actually 12 pairs of 9. And if I asked you what's 12 pairs of 9, the answer is 108. In India, it's called exo art, and they worship it. It's a sacred harmonic number. It's the number of verses that they have in a shastra. It's got to do with the number of beads on their mala beads for reciting the prayers. There's 108 steps in Tai Chi. It goes on and on. So I've actually written a whole encyclopedia on the number 108. I've written that in the Book of 5, Volume 4. So I was the first one to put out a complete dictionary of every reference from every culture on the number 108. So I'm really proud of that, and it's opened up many doors. So you can imagine 1.5 billion people on the planet worship Shri 108, but it's happening mindlessly. They don't even know why they worship it. So I went to India to a conference to explain that, and that's how I got my name 108. I didn't call myself 108. It was given to me at a conference in Infosys at Hyderabad High Tech Systems. So friends of mine like Joe Dubb, he's taken this knowledge that I've worked out and he's photoshopped it and made it more attractive. So you can see the wheel of 24 here. I've done it showing the pairs. You can see the 12 pairs of 9, which add up to 108. And this is taken from some of my books. So it works out that, so there is a bit of a mystery to this. That when you look at it as 2 rows of 12, all the columns add up to 999, but the 12th column has a double 9. So it is 12 lots of 9 is 108 plus another 9. So when you add 108 plus the 9, it adds up to 117. And when you start examining where does 117 appear, it's got to do with the hertz, or the cycles per second of, say, the king's chamber in the pyramid. So there's a lot of amazing references to 117. But in this instance, we're just going to call it the 108 code. But we can write those 2 rows of 12 in another way. We can call it 3 rows of 8. So here below on the chart, you can see 3 rows of 8. And you can see 111, it adds up to 111 there. And there's another column that has the 3 8s. So triple unity and 888. And what I'm showing is that this is highly encoded information within this mathematics of flowers and planets, and it's in the human body, is the Fibonacci sequence, and it opens up a huge tunnel of information that you could spend the rest of your life just studying this. And there was a group called the Fibonacci Association in America that have been recording information for 40 years. So we're called fibonatics, like lunatics, but fibonatic is someone who is so engrossed and adores the hidden gems within the Fibonacci sequence. So I've written 10 books on this just to record it. Yeah, so you can start looking at other numbers as well. You can start looking at all these other numbers within the code. Just checking my time here. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So here we've got the Fibonacci sequence in the Wheel of 24, and rather than looking, I think Marco Rodin showed that there's two triangles that relate to 369, but rather than seeing 369 as a separation, I show it. My discovery here is that the 369 code in the Wheel of 24 is actually the universal hexagram, where if you start from where the green arrow is and you follow this unbroken line, which shows that the true path of 369 is not fractionated triangles but a single line unicursal hexagram. So I've got whole DVDs just on this alone because it, like I said, will open up other doors to the mysteries. So we can look at the phi code as volumes. So you're looking here at 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 as shaded areas, and that gives you a little bit more information, how it's like a cogged wheel. And once you start studying this, you'll start seeing, you could be driving around and see a letterbox with the number 108, or you look at the time, oh my God, it's 8 minutes past 1. The problem is because it's resonance, you're going to start seeing this number everywhere. Yeah, most people are familiar with the 1111. That's a good one. As a builder by trade, I have dreams where I'm in another world and I can see huge columns, and these mystery schools where we study all these healing rooms may have 24 columns, because 24 is an anointed number. So I'm just showing you this picture because it's what we call bioarchitecture, because when we build beautiful buildings based on the mathematics of flowers, we resonate to it. We can teach better. We can learn better. Our consciousness opens up like a flower. So it's our duty as builders and educators to provide the best possible schools, which has trees and nature. Another thing that I like to do is, because there's a connection between 24 and 9, I've taken the 24 repeating numbers and I've plugged them into what we call the 9-point circle, because number 9 is the key. It shows that every time we work with the 9-point circle, symmetry is revealed where it normally wouldn't be seen in the decimal system. So in my books, I show all this symmetry here. And so I've taken that symmetry of the 9-point circle. So here, where you see the white lines, that's the 24 code plugged into the 9-point circle, and it's mirror image. It looks like the hemispheres of a brain. We want to align our future technology to frictionless electrodes using this knowledge here. Okay. So this is a painting that I've done called Doll Fusion that shows the 24 code. So when I do, every year I do a 2-3 week fast, and I often do a mathematical code like this. So this is half human, half woman, and there's a pyramid, there's a squaring of the circle, there's all the 24 repeating numbers, and a lot of information embedded in there. So I love art. A lot of my art, as you will see, is based on mathematics. Just to conclude on a few animations. When we take the golden spiral, one spiral, and mirror image it and align the eye of the spiral with the other one, so two spirals put together create an infinite series. So what that means is that you're seeing the love heart, but every time you zoom in and you look at the love heart, it inverts, and then if you zoom in, it goes upright and inverts. So what you're seeing is an oscillation. And these waves go infinitely large and infinitely small. So this was done by my colleague Dan Winter, who was one of the first teachers on sacred geometry. And he helped promote the word fractal. So fractal means that the more I look inside the heart, there's another heart and another heart. And then we did another animation. Here's another animation of Metatron's cube. We saw that one before, turning ourselves inside out. And I'm doing some research where if the inner cube is in the phi ratio of the larger cube, if the larger cube is, say, 1 square unit, 1 cubic unit, and the inner cube is 0.618, that's where amazing powers are unleashed. So I'm working on that at the moment. And here's another cube showing you the origin of A, B, C. So here we got the phi spiral, and we're tilting it inside. What you're actually looking at is not just the phi spiral, it's the 3D ram's horn. So when the ram's horn is tilted inside, say, the pyramid, but the tetrahedron, we cast shadows on the wall. We see certain shadows cast upon the wall, and it creates the alpha beta, the language. This is the language of light, perfect hyperdynamic systems revealing how we communicate. So this is all from the Fibonacci sequence, the ability to communicate through not just humans, but through all galactic species. So the golden spiral is the key to all universal systems of communication. Again, in here, when we take one spiral, one ram's horn rotated 100 times or 1,000,000 times reveals a cup within the cup within the cup. Dan Winter, who made this innovation, calls it the Grail Cup. This search for the Holy Grail could be the sacred mathematics that's in our DNA. So this is very psychoactive. It means that when we look at this, we have an emotional response. Some people cry when they see the language of light for the first time, or the cup within the cup, because they recognize that this is a truth. It's a timeless truth of creation. Okay, so there's the 3 different phi codes, and these can go on walls and glass to have that energy around. Space clearing devices, as in feng shui. Having these geometries in your room are great for resonance. Okay, I've got extra information on phi, but I would like to skip some of this stuff, because I'll just give you some names. There's pentahexa, which has got to do with DNA. One, just getting the time so I can finish. Right. Okay. So there's another thing to do with time codes is when we take the reciprocal of the number 144, because 144,000 has got to do with the speed of light, and when we divide one by 144, we end up with a certain number called 0.00694 repeater. And Bruce Cathy, who introduced us to ley lines, told us that the speed of light, 144,000, has a reciprocal constant called the gravity constant, which is the reciprocal of 144 is 0.00694, rounded off to 695. So this is the advanced information where when we're just doing an introduction now, but there's a lot more coming where we look at the numbers of light, and it's always looking at reciprocals. And we can see here that Albrecht Dürer could construct the pentagon from the hexagon. We can draw these things in our classes, or without changing the radius of the circle. So there's a lot more to come on the golden ratio. I'm just showing you some images to show that this is going into what we call the powers of phi. 1.618 squared cubed forms actually the caduceus, which is the medical symbol. So when you start going into higher dimensions based on 1.618, means you're attuned to the real knowledge. Okay, so I'm going to skip part 3. I just wanted to show you that there's more to come, how we can link Vedic mathematics to Paramahansa Yogananda, help bring down Vedic maths from India into America. And a lot of this knowledge here in these sutras were based on the masters who shared their knowledge, and they want to wake up the world. So it's all about waking up consciousness. I'm going to skip all. I did a journey to India where I met all these masters and did a lot with the sutras. So I teach speed mathematics, which is what we're going to do soon in another webinar. But I just want to get to the end of this, where when we work with our students, we give them certificates to say they've completed the course. So I wanted to get to this point here where if you enjoyed this knowledge on sacred geometry, I'd like to I would like to offer it to you as an online course. It's the perfect time with all this COVID um, isolation going on at the moment, that everyone's at home. So what a perfect time to be learning. So we have currently 2 online e-courses, and what I've just shown you now was an introduction to sacred geometry with a bit of advanced stuff. So what I'd like to offer you is a beginner's guide to sacred geometry. Like where do you start with sacred geometry? So the way to start would be to study all the circle is the beginning, then the triangle, then the square, then the pentacle, then the hexagon. So this is a journey from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. It's a natural progression. And so when you go through when you download these e-courses, you actually you get a free ebook. But with this offer that we're offering here, we're actually offering all 6 ebooks I've written 6 workbooks, and there's 6 ebooks but normally you just get one. But with this offer, we're offering all our workbooks online. So normally that would be valued at $460, but for those people watching this this webinar, we're offering it for $238 in AUD, and that's about 154 USD. So you get all these 9 lessons, and it's for everyone. It's for adults. It's if you're a parent. This is great for your children. It's covering 40 years of deep research that I've done, and I've made it really simple, high visual content. So I'm typing this link in now. If you want to download this course, you'll see it in your message box now. So you just take this link and click on it, and if you don't get it for some reason, we'll send it out as an email as a follow-up anyway. So just wanted to let you know that there's a lot more amazing information to come. So these are live teachings. You can see here that we're teaching some of the courses out in the forest as our background, because the message is that we must stay attuned to studying with nature, copying nature, and this is how we're going to save the planet. And it could take 20 years, because education is the key. And we've got a word for this. It's called ecosophy. Eco is our environment, and the Sophia is the wisdom element. So sacred mathematics is reminding us of our connection to the environment. So here you can see on the screen the 5-pointed star. So in Pythagoras' time, if you were part of this order, you had to not only just fast for 1 year, you had to be silent, because that meant you were disconnecting from this world of gossip and disease, and you were ready to devote your life to a higher principle, to higher knowledge. So the emblem for this order, for man and woman of the Pythagorean order, was the 5-pointed star, a blue pentacle, and on the 5 points of that pentacle they had 5 letters: H, Y, G, I, A. If you look closely, you can just see it in blue writing. So HYGI spelt Hygeia, which has got to do with the word hygiene. The goddess of health and healing has a deep sacred connection to sacred geometry. So so if you have any messages that you'd like, just type them in. You can always email us at info@sacredgeometry.com. And we'll keep in touch with you for the next courses. So I hope you enjoyed this.